Hey everybody, my name's Andy.
And I'm Devin.
And welcome to False Pretenses. Today, we're going to be taking a look at the Antar family and the Crazy Eddie fraud. The Crazy Eddie fraud is a notorious and intricate case of corporate fraud that unfolded in the 1980s. It involved the electronic retail chain Crazy Eddie, which was known for its aggressive advertising and catchy commercials featuring its charismatic founder, Eddie Antar. However, behind the flashy facade, a massive financial fraud scheme was taking place. Crazy Eddie was a consumer electronics chain in the northeastern United States. The chain started in 1971 in Brooklyn, New York by Eddie Antar and his father, Sam Antar. The chain rose to prominence throughout the tri-state area as much for its prices as for its memorable radio and TV commercials featuring a frenetic, crazy character played by radio DJ Jerry Carroll. At its peak, Crazy Eddie had 43 stores in 4 states and reported more than $300 million saved.
Nothing more than a good old family business, I right?
That's right. Did you know that like 70% of family businesses fail?
You know, that may be true, but those 70% don't have fraud on their side.
That's facts. Almost from the beginning, Crazy Eddie's management engaged in various forms of fraud. The Antars deliberately falsified their books to reduce or even eliminate their taxable income. They also paid employees off the books and regularly skimmed thousands of dollars in cash earned at the shops. For every $5 Crazy Eddie reported as income, $1 was taken by the Antars. In 1979, the Antars began depositing much of this money, which was hundreds of thousands of dollars, in Israeli bank accounts. The Antar family skimmed an estimated $3 to $4 million per year at the height of their fraud. In one offshore bank account, the family deposited more than $6 million between 1980 and 1983. Now, while I agree what the Antars did was wrong, I mean, we've all committed at least a little bit of tax evasion at some point, right?
No.
I mean, you've never gotten like a file or a document after you filed your tax return and you were just like, I already filed my tax return. It's too late.
I mean, it's immaterial at that point, right?
Yeah, tax evasion. Yeah, IRS. Yeah, I got another one.
I don't know what's more impressive. The fact that you're ratting me out to the feds or that you actually got in touch with the IRS.
I've got powers, brother. By 1983, it was becoming more and more difficult to hide the millions of illicit dollars. The Antars decided that the way to cover up their growing fraud was to take the company public. In preparation, Eddie initiated a plan in 1979 to skim less each year. Since more income was actually being reported now, this had the effect of showing drastically increasing profit margins, while the company's actual profits, taking into account the skimmed profits, increased around 13%. Reported profits increased nearly 171%. Despite the obvious misgivings of people closely associated with Crazy Eddie, the company held its initial public offering on September 13th, 1984. Shares of the company initially sold for $8, but by early 1986, Crazy Eddie stock was trading more than $75 per share.
It actually blows my mind that he took his fraudulent company public.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, once you take your company public, you've got millions of eyes. You've got IRS, you've got, analysts, you've got creditors, all that stuff.
Wouldn't you want the least amount of attention possible?
You would, but the Crazy Eddie had family on his side.
What do you mean by that?
Eddie was able to recruit his cousin, Sammy Antar, to assist the company with its fraud. Sammy earned a degree in accounting in 1980 and served his internship with Penn & Horowitz, the firm that audited Crazy Eddie. In 1986, Sammy was named Chief Financial Officer of Penn & Horowitz. Eddie told Sammy that there was about $3 million deficit from the previous year's inventory fraud that needed to be hidden. Additionally, he was instructed to find ways to show a 10% growth in sales.
Holy shit, dude.
Am I right? The dude just went out, got an accounting degree, and then just, hey, bro, I got you. But the fact that he became CFO in 6 years, Jesus.
How do I get that track?
A whole bunch of dick sucking. One of Sammy's major schemes was a money laundering operation later known as the Panama Pump. Sammy opened up multiple accounts in Panama and would transfer the money from the Antar's Israeli bank accounts into the new Panama account. These Panama accounts were then used to inflate same-store sales for the company. As a public company, Eddie, Sammy, and others engaged in increasing amounts of inventory fraud to increase reported profits and inflate the value of Crazy Eddie stock. For the fiscal year ending on March 1st, 1985, Crazy Eddie falsified inventories by $3 million. The next fiscal year, that amount increased to between $10 and $12 million. The crazy thing about this is that inventory is honestly one of the hardest assets on the balance sheet to commit fraud because you have inventory count. So what you're shown on your sheet, you should technically have that disposable, like tangible in your hands.
Right, like I was about to say, don't the auditors count the inventory?
They're supposed to. And they did. But the way that Eddie was able to trick these auditors, so they basically had like a warehouse, right? And they had boxes. So they would stack the boxes all the way up to the ceiling in this warehouse. And they basically just told the auditor, yeah, it goes back like 20 rows. All the way up to the ceiling, it's like that, all the way back. There was nothing behind those boxes in front. And nobody even like pushed it or nothing. They were just like, oh, okay, yeah.
So this is just another instance of taking at the face value, you know,
Face
taking their
value,
word
bro.
for it.
Got to, man. People don't learn their lesson.
So trustworthy. Someone named Crazy Eddie.
Crazy Eddie. He's a good guy. Only months after Crazy Eddie's IPO, Antar's marriage to his wife, Debbie, became unstable. He soon began an affair with a younger woman also named Debbie. The home-wrecking pair were caught by Eddie's wife and sister on New Year's Eve, 1984. Crazy Eddie's trouble began almost immediately afterward, since the scam heavily relied on family members helping to keep the appearance that it was an immensely successful company. I mean, what can you say, dude? Crazy Eddie loved him a good old-fashioned Debbie cream pie.
I can't blame him. Those little Debbie cream pies are the best, especially the oatmeal ones.
Yeah, I think we might be talking about two different cream pies.
Oh.
By 1987, Sammy Antar's goal was no longer to show greater profitability, but rather to disguise previous frauds. During fiscal year 1987, Crazy Eddie falsified inventories between $22.5 and $28 million. In addition, Crazy Eddie booked $20 million in phony debit memos or chargebacks to vendors that reduced their liabilities on the book. As the company's fraud became more difficult to disguise, the company's perception of Crazy Eddie as a commercial success began to change. By October 1986, the company's stock value had decreased to $17.50 per share. During December of 1986, Eddie announced his resignation as president and CEO, but in April 1987, it was announced that Eddie had in fact retained his role, but had rather dismissed his father instead. But by then, Eddie had already cashed out his share of Crazy Eddie stock, worth between $25 and $30 million.
Bro, how did the government not step in immediately and put an end to this?
I mean, it really doesn't make any sense. It's so obvious. You say that you're going to step down as CEO, but then all of a sudden you don't step down as CEO, but you sold all of your shares. Like, it's kind of obvious.
Like, I know hindsight is 20/20, but you would have thought someone would have seen it.
They legally blind, bro.
To all of the auditors and regulators watching this right now, like, write this down. Do better.
Do better. By the spring of 1987, Crazy Eddie's stock cost less than $10 a share. In May 1987, Eddie began proceedings to make the company a privately held company again, realizing that going public was a huge mistake. As Eddie was trying to take his company private again, a Houston native named Elias Zinn entered the picture and started buying up shares in Crazy Eddie. Zinn was able to partner with a management consultant that backed the purchase of $17.5 million in Crazy Eddie stock, which represented roughly 7.5% of the outstanding shares, giving Zinn controlling interest, which enabled them to initiate a hostile takeover. Once rumors of a takeover started, financial analysts began to examine Crazy Eddie more closely. What they discovered was that while most stockholders lost money since 1984, Eddie had sold 6.5 million shares worth $74 million. This resulted in a flurry of lawsuits filed against the Antar family. After losing the bidding war for Crazy Eddie on November 6, 1987, Elias Zinn became the new owner. Zinn immediately dismissed the rest of the Antar family from any important jobs. When Zinn completed the preliminary audit a few weeks after the takeover, they estimated that Crazy Eddie's inventory was short by about 40 to 50 million. That final figure ended up being $80 million.
Dude, people want to complain about a bad investment, but I mean, imagine buying a fraudulent company.
Bro, I would be so pissed if I spent, like $7.5 million on just an empty bucket of nothing. Like, before I spend that much money, I think I'm going to do the audit before.
Dude, like, I almost feel bad for him, but on the same page, why would you spend $17.5 million before you audited it?
Yeah, that's That doesn't make any sense to me. In the meantime, a longtime Crazy Eddie associate named Arnie Spindler, who quit the company after Eddie dismissed his father in 1986, had provided investigators with information concerning Crazy Eddie's fraudulent business practices. Spindler implicated Eddie and Sammy, but stated the rest of the family was innocent, though subpoenas were served to the entire Antar family. Based on this information, the SEC charged Eddie with securities fraud and illegal insider trading on September 6, 1989. In January 1990, a federal district judge ordered Eddie to repatriate more than $50 million he had transferred illegally to Israel. He was also ordered to appear in court to explain what happened to the money. When he failed to appear, an arrest warrant was issued. Eddie surrendered to U.S. Marshals a week later, but was released and ordered to appear at a second hearing. When he had failed to appear at that hearing, a second arrest was issued and his assets were frozen.
What did they expect? That he was just going to miraculously show up to the second?
I'm gonna be honest. This is probably the stupidest shit that I've ever read in my life. You're going to give this man an opportunity not to show again?
Hey, man. Second time's the charm,
Fool
right?
me once, shame on you. Fool me twice, shame on you again. Eddie fled to Israel using a fake passport and the alias David Jacob Levi Cohen and purchased a townhouse in the city of Yavne. After Eddie fled the country, Sammy offered to testify in exchange for immunity. Sammy pleaded guilty to 3 felonies, but he avoided jail time in exchange for his testimony. However, he was still sentenced to 6 months on house arrest, 1,200 hours of community service, 3 years of probation, and was levied more than 10 grand in fines. Afterwards, Sammy became an advisor for government agencies and businesses investigating fraud.
Hold up. So he started using his evil for good?
Yeah, a silver lining in this story, man. And also, Sammy, dude, smart as shit.
What's up with you always giving props to these fraudsters, bro?
I mean, whether you're good or evil, bro, real recognize real. Eddie was arrested in June 1992 on federal racketeering conspiracy charges and was extradited to the U.S. in January 1993. He pled not guilty and his trial began in June 1993. On July 20th, Eddie was found guilty on 17 counts of fraud and sentenced to 12.5 years in prison. Eddie immediately filed an appeal on the decision. His new sentence was 8 years in prison and he had to pay $150 million in fines, in addition to the $1 billion in judgments against him from the various civil suits. Efforts to recover additional money from the Antar family on behalf of defrauded stockholders were completed in 2012. So that's all. Eddie went to jail. The money was paid back. Case closed.
I'd imagine so, but something tells me that's not the end of the story.
Got him! Soon after the chain closed in 1989, a group led by Al Ajmi bought the rights to Crazy Eddie and announced they purchased the lease of the original location with intent to reopen the chain where it all started. However, the Ajmi group was unable to finish opening the store. In 1998, the grandchildren of Eddie, Alan, and Mitchell Antar revived the chain with a shop in Wayne, New Jersey, and as an online internet venture, CrazyEddieOnline.com. Despite plans to expand the chain to 10 new stores, the new Crazy Eddie never expanded, and in 1999, the only shop of Crazy Eddie closed. In 2001, Eddie returned to the company. He reinitiated the website as CrazyEddie.com and hired the same DJ from before to do his advertising. By 2004, CrazyEddie.com had disappeared again, and after a brief attempt to revive the online retailer in 2005, Crazy Eddie ceased to exist yet again. Between 2005 and 2018, there were multiple hopeful investors that attempted to reopen the Crazy Eddie train and piggyback off the story to leverage the hype. However, none of the attempts amounted to any success. And by 2018, the Crazy Eddie trademark was listed as abandoned. On September 10th, 2016, Eddie Antar died at the age of 68.
Gotta give him props for trying to revive that store, though.
Nah, bro. They were just trying to get on the notorious, try to hype up this fraud and try to really piggyback sales off that. But at the end of the day, Crazy Eddie sold all of their electronics at like pennies on the dollars. Just not a profitable business.
That's true. If something's dead, just let it die. Leave it
that
buried.
shit dead.
You don't see me trying to, dig up Mr. Snuggles.
Damn. That wraps up Crazy Eddie right there. So what do you guys think? Do you think if he never went public, then this fraud would still kind of be going on today, or was it just kind of inevitable?
Let us know what you think. And that's it for us at False Pretenses.
Catch you next time.